Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights.
Welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed. I am your host. Today, I am joined by the awesome, always smiling, always insightful Bryce. Bryce, how are you?
Hey, Hector. Thank you for having me today.
So, Bryce, Mr. Hill, tell us a little bit more about where do you sit in the co-working world?
Yeah, so I'm in Colorado and I'm part of a group that owns some locations under the Office Evolution and VentureX brands here in the Denver metro area across the Front Range.
You're actually in the newsletter this week, so we're going to get to that in a second. What we are going to dig into in today's episode is looking at some merger and acquisition activity, looking at some reciprocal deals that are being set up, digging a little bit into some fun new networking ideas and event ideas, running over some EOS smart goals, and then circling out with some numbers out of Canada and some other regions. So before we dive into that, you probably noticed that we have a new guest co-host today. We're actually running a new program at the newsletter where we're actually going to start bringing in great people from across our patron brands to come and join us on the podcast, share what they're seeing, share what they're doing, being part of the conversation. And when I did reach out to a few people, obviously Bryce was one of the first people I reached out to, but also the whole team at Vast and UFG were like, put Bryce on. He is a great person to speak to. Office Evolution, VentureX, and Intelligent Office are all now patron status brands. So we are very much appreciative of their support, and we're appreciative that they're borrowing us, Bryce, for a little bit to dig into today's news. For folks who want to follow along, head over to thisweekincoworking.com and hit on week 40. If you go under market news, you will see that Bryce was actually mentioned in a story all about two types of M&As. What were you guys up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, some exciting stuff as of October 1st. The Office Evolution location that we have operated up in Longmont, we have officially sold that location to a family who will operate it as a single location. It is their first kind of go into the co-working industry and realm. They come from a completely different corporate and tech background, but they're excited. They live local up there in the Longmont area. And they're excited to have a family run business. I believe their son will be involved. And I think it's a nice fit for them. It was the furthest location for me to get to in our group. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to have family that'll be hands-on. It's a smaller space, about 10,000 square feet. And so I think it makes a little bit more sense to be operated in that way.
I was going to actually ask you why you sold it, but the proximity actually makes a lot of sense, right? If it's not in that vicinity to easily service, it makes sense that you would not offload that, but find someone else who could run it maybe a little bit better, a little bit more attentively. But you also acquired a space, right? Tell us about that.
That's right. So there is a VentureX Denver South. We have acquired that as of the 1st of October as well. And that space has been in operation since 2017, and it sits kind of in the middle of the Denver market with some of my locations to the south of it, some of my locations to the north of it. And so it just kind of made sense. Roy Linfield, who's been operating the space for a few years, was looking to exit the market and enjoy some just kind of more free time. And I think, as he said, he was approached by multiple buyers. I think we were the logical group to take over the space just based on the density of the locations that we have here in the Colorado market.
That's actually really interesting, because I'm thinking back to the conversation I had with Shane over at UFG a couple of weeks ago here on the podcast, when he was saying there was a lot of looking at M&A from both sides within the franchise network. And this is just one glowing example that two different transactions have happened and the communities are essentially better off because of the transaction. But this isn't your first two M&A transactions, is it?
The bulk of our Office Evolution locations were once the corporate locations of the Office Evolution brand when it was based still here in Colorado. When the United Franchise Group came in and took over the brand, those locations converted to being franchise locations, locally owned. And then just over the past few years, we've merged with some other operators, Katie and Scott Barraway, who had some Office Evolution locations, some additional VentureX sites as well. And so I think just over the years, what we've found is sometimes it makes sense to come together. Katie and I have worked kind of side by side over the years. We started in co-working around the same time. And we've always had that spirit of collaboration, and the power of community just expands when you bring everyone into the fold. It just makes
Hmm.
even more sense to operate as a single unit.
Yeah, there is so many benefits. I'm going to dig into some of the benefits with you in a sec, but there is more and more M&A transactions, not only here in America, also in the newsletter this week, we saw M&A across France through, unfortunately, a liquidation event or a liquidation banking situation where LMB acquired the assets of two separate brands. So we're seeing this consolidation all across the different regions as people figure out what are the benefits of a network, what are the benefits of working under one unit, but also, what are the economies of scale? In the post you shared, you mentioned Denver Coworking LLC, and then you mentioned the Ohana Network. What are they?
Yeah, it's 10 ways to say the same thing, right? So Denver Co-working LLC is what's on the bank account, it's what's on the tax documents, that's our government name, if you will.
Hmm.
But the Ohana Network is a name that we coined to try to explain these vast benefits, right? The vast brand has these multiple types of co-working brands within it, the VentureX, Office Evolution, and Intelligent Office. And we are so densely packed in one area here in the Denver community, the Front Range, as we call it, where we wanted a way to just quickly explain to people, if you join one location, you get access to all of these. And Ohana has always been kind of a core pillar of the Office Evolution brand. And it was what drew Diane Mapes on my team, one of our owners. It's what drew her to the brand in the first place. And so that is something that we always try to maintain. And our thought was, why not just make that what we call ourselves, right? We're not Marriott Bonvoy, but we're the Ohana Network is our way of saying, you get these extra special benefits that cross between the two brands. Whereas normally part of the franchise system is, you join a Venture X, you get some sort of reciprocal benefits at the other
Yeah,
Venture X locations. This was our way of saying it's not brand specific.
yeah,
It's across the portfolio here.
that's really cool. And obviously, I love the name Ohana. It's just such a great word from Hawaiian origin, I believe, for
That's right.
folks who maybe are listening from across the world. Also, you mentioned the fact that it's reciprocal, right? So any member of any space can pop into any other space. And because you're all so closely packed together, are you seeing a lot of that utilization? Are people f- roaming around?
Yeah, it's interesting. It doesn't happen as often as you would think, but the
Hmm.
users that do, I'm going to shout out Michael Bailey really quickly. So Michael Bailey is a attorney, and he has an office with us at one of our spaces. And in our group chat, there is the daily journey of Michael Bailey. He has hundreds of ties, and we're always seeing pictures of him in a different one of our spaces where he just goes and meets his clients wherever
Hmm.
right? And so he bounces around, and in a day, we may see him at 4 or 5 of our
Oh, wow.
locations across a day. And so it's always funny to see the journey, but not everyone does it, but it's nice to have, right? If you're going to take the Subaru into the Subaru dealership in Golden, you maybe use the downtown location, but
Hmm.
why not pop in and work for the day while you're waiting for your
Yeah.
car? Just
Yeah.
if you're a member at one, you're a member at all of them.
I mean, that was going to be my other question. Because obviously, ever since the beginning of co-working, there's been some level of reciprocality between different spaces, right? It started with the co-working visa program. That became really hard to manage. There was a bit of, price arbitrage that affected some of the spaces in greater areas compared to those in the countryside. Some really cheeky people very early on bought memberships at the cheaper spaces in the countryside, but spent all their time in the CBD. And that sort of kind of broke the framework. And then we saw, things like CoPass and DeskPass, etc., come out
Mm.
as like a secondary third party to this. But we're starting to see this resurgence. I was on stage in Canada on Monday. Yeah, I don't remember what day it is. This week, yeah, I was there and I was on stage and I was talking about how there's this growth in networks and reciprocity between spaces. I mentioned a few others at the Convendum and Hub Australia and a few others who'd done this before. Obviously, you with the Ohana Network. But even today in the newsletter, we saw two UK brands, indie brands, Dragon Co-working and the Hive Angleton, set up a reciprocal membership thing. And I think you're completely right. It's not about every member using it all the time, but about offering that flexibility, that fluidity, because we are striving towards a ecosystem of work, right? You have a home base, you have somewhere where you plug in, the Wi-Fi automatically connects, but increasingly as life pulls us into different elements and, you know, there's a kids soccer tournament or they have to go dance class or you'll have to take your car to get serviced, you're going to have to work from different places. And having access to that, I think, is going to become increasingly part of the expectation for co-working brands, as well as the fact that we're still, I mean, WeWork's doing this on the enterprise level. Last week in the newsletter, we did see a shift where WeWork's existing network, which is obviously with the vast started with the vast group, they went from, starting with that to adding another 1,000+ locations for their enterprise customers to have reciprocal access to. So if it's happening at enterprise and it's happening at indie, it's gonna eventually be something.
That's right, meet in the middle.
Exactly, where every co-working membership will have this. What was the reason other than that one member? Was there any specific, like, did people ask for it, or was it just something you started seeing as a trend?
What, yeah, I mean, as part of the Office Evolution brand, it's always been part of the way that it works where when I joined this group that had the Venture X brand, we're trying to figure out like where does that stop? Why would we stop people? And so the other piece of it is it's just easier to explain, right? Simplicity is always so just here's the link, here's my sites, join wherever you want and just go wherever you want. And I think it just makes it easier for people to understand. And sometimes we get people who are like, well, is it any cheaper if I just want to come to the one? And it's not because it doesn't really, there's no reason to do that. And if you want to just go to the one, go to the one.
Yeah. You bring up a very interesting point, and that is we've seen brands where you have one space membership and multi-space membership, much in the same way as Equium gyms. You have a
That's right.
home-based membership and then a roaming membership. But it completely makes sense that with the vicinity that you're in, with that near proximity, it probably just makes sense to have one package, especially in a world where we're still busy explaining to 98% of the world what co-working is and how to do it. I think complicating it with multiple memberships is just a hindrance.
Yeah, I think another way that it started for us too was as we started to attract these larger companies and we started to get into these companies where their employees are spread throughout the metro area. And so it was, well, how do we handle this where they've got a home base, but then half their people are in Boulder, half of them are in the South Metro. And so that's also kind of the impetus of this is, okay, this just makes it simpler. They can sign up with a single membership and then their employees can use it wherever.
I have just so many more questions around how the tech of that works, given that, I mean, I know that most of your spaces probably use the same set of technology, but obviously as you're acquiring, you're going to have different mixes of that. On a scale of 1 to running into a wall, how easy has it been to like handle that reciprocity program across your internal Ohana network?
Yeah. Running my head into the wall.
Unfortunately, I thought so. But yes, I kind of set you up for that one. We see it all the time. We want to move fast as operators, as professionals. We want to offer as much flexibility, but it always feels like we're dragging the tech along to kind of fit into, we're not just renting out desks and Wi-Fi anymore, right? The model has changed. And it's definitely going to be something I bring up with all the vendors in Chicago when I land there. It's going to be like, guys, you've got to iterate faster. Like,
That's
the
right.
models have changed. There is no platform right now that offers a fractional membership out of the box. You can't set up two companies using the same resource on different days. No platform offers this. Yet in the UK, they're seeing a 30% premium on offices renting it to two companies instead of one. We've got to explore that, or at least make it easier to experiment than running into walls whenever you want to do something that's good for your community.
Yeah. And we just take the approach of do what's right for the members, do what's right for the community and what they want, and we'll figure it out on the back end. And some days it does feel like you're back there and you're plugging and unplugging things, you're doing whatever. But at the end of the day, that's the result we want is for people to be able to do what they want to do.
Yep. And I'd always go back to that famous gif of the little guy in the subway, like the ticket thing. He gets a ticket and just puts it out the other one. The person's like, oh my God, the machine did everything. And it's just a guy inside taking the
Yes.
ticket. I'm like, that is co-working in one GIF, right? Until we get everything to work, that is what we all do every day, right? It's just plugging from one place to another, making sure the
Hmm.
experience looks good, and we'll figure everything out later when we can breathe. But talking about the experience, there was another post that I shared from Kim Lee over at Forge. She shared a really funny post that she'd finally won their Mahjong networking event. And it's got me thinking that there's so many great types of networking events that are different, unique, customized to your own customers. I just put a call out. If you've done an event that isn't traditional, let us know. Submit the link. I'd love to see what other folks are doing. But on that topic, like what's your favorite types of networking events to put on at your Ohana network?
Yeah, I laugh because I'm notoriously terrible at networking events. I just want to grab my free food. I want to snack for a moment, maybe chat with some of the people that I already know but haven't seen in a while and haven't had a chance to. But the sort of traditional networking is just does not click for me. There are people on my team that's their power. We coined a term, it's an acronym, union, and it's
Mhm.
unconventional networking in our neighborhood. And
Okay.
the sort of catchphrase is leave your business card at home. Just we just
Mm,
kind of chatted with each other, and it was not
yeah.
about like what do you do for work and what are your targets for the year. It was
Yeah.
just like let's just get to know each other. And hey, we're probably going to run into each other in the neighborhood. I'm going to see you at the Mexican
Yeah.
place around the corner or waiting to grab your sandwich at lunch. And he's
Yep.
like, let's just get to know each other.
That's such a cool acronym, union. It's also just such a good way to position these as more than just a business benefit. For folks who don't know, back in 2013, I used to run co-working spaces. I then spent years helping different community managers in different ways. And I've seen so many great events and so many bad events. The ones that were always the worst were the ones that focused on the business owner because they're just so busy. Like it's great to do lunch and learns and do that kind of stuff, but it completely forgot the fact that the vast majority of members are normally working there as their job. They're not there because they're growing their business. Almost all the spaces that I saw, the vast majority of members were there because their employer was there, or that's where their office was, or they're remote workers. And all the events were targeted at business owners. You had this huge gap. And on the flip side, no one wanted to stay at work after the hours. So
Right.
the space kind of emptied out at 5 p.m. and everyone somehow landed up at the pub across the road, even though if you host drinks in the space, they all got
Right.
out. And so where it got really, really interesting is to see the different types of events that people had to come up with, especially in the UK, that broke away A, from the pub culture, and B, made it fun for people who weren't running businesses.
Right.
Personal skill development, things like that. My favorite ones were pitch deck karaoke. It's basically you go to a website and it generates 5 random slides that you've never seen before, and you have to go up and present this, whether it's a
Hmm.
startup or, and it just becomes such a laugh because you have no idea what's coming up there. So you think the next slide is going to be like, use case, and then there's like a penguin riding on a unicorn, and you have to like, so it's really, really fun, especially for like a sales orientated space, because
Hmm.
everyone's kind of one up each other, and it's just, that's really, really fun. The others is just how many people connect over food. I mean, this was really cool in like multicultural spaces, seeing people like do, potlucks, seeing people, build a sandwich or build a salad where you can kind of, it's really cheap to do, but people aren't going to run back to their desks most time if they've built their food together, especially if you
Yeah.
have a nice lounge area. Just really good ways to network and create those bonds without being like, so what do you do?
Exactly. Yeah. I think that that's the goal for me when I'm looking to attend or host a networking
Hmm.
event is I just want something where we're doing something together that naturally is going to allow us to just chat and just get to know
Yeah.
each. You find that you end up getting to know people better than the ones where that was actually the intent.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then we've seen a lot with also like walking events or running clubs or, cycling together, activities that aren't traditionally in the space but coordinated and mostly led by members. I find if it's the most
Hmm.
successful, you just give them the space, you give them the bike parking, secure storage, whatever it is that facilitates it, but they will actually take that and build the community and the event around it. And I think those are probably the most successful events because you don't have to worry about it. Your members are bought in, they're invested, and it's also easy to measure, right? There's no cost involved, and it's something that has that measurable bond. It reduces churn, it improves your retention, it improves your referrals, and those are all things that every co-working space should be monitoring, not just thinking, oh, it's a Friday, it's, our happy hour night, right? It's very hard to go from that to all the immeasurable things that create measurable results. And on that topic, we had another article from the team over at Nexodus who shared 10 smart goals and objectives that you should be monitoring and tracking. Falls under the EOS system, if you've heard of that when you're listening in. It's all about making goals that are measurable, that are simple, and etc. But as I said, it's part of the EOS system. Now, Bryce, you mentioned before we jumped on the call that you guys kind of do EOS at your company. What does it mean to you guys, and why did you go kinda and not full EOS?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, we do operate on EOS, and at the front desk at each of our sites, we have the What the Heck is EOS book for our members to pick up as well. But what we found is to allow ourselves a little bit of flexibility, right? And so stepping a little bit outside of the framework in a way that allows us to fit better into our model. I mean, it's nothing crazy, but just having that ability to get away from the rigidity and have some flexibility in the way that we name things or do things, what our quarterly meetings look like and what our annual sessions look like, and all of that, I think has been just kind of our departure from sort of the framework. But
Mhm.
the bones are still there. I mean, we are operating on EOS for sure.
So the article actually looks at 10 different smart variables to track and goals to set. But what was interesting is it wasn't the traditional ones that we keep seeing, right? It wasn't just sales, it wasn't just marketing spend. It also dug into kind of like the operational efficiency side of it. I know from our previous conversations, both online and at conferences, this is something that we both geek out a lot about. What caught your attention in this piece about that operational efficiency side of setting goals?
Yeah, I think that that's something that we are in my org actively trying to pursue is how do we measure operational success? We are trying to measure hospitality. And it's like, how do you do this in a way? How do you put that on a scorecard? Obviously your experience in your space has an effect on other things, but not everything can be bottled down to a number or can it, right?
Hmm.
And I think that that's what kind of stuck out to me is like, okay, there is a way to find operational KPIs, and really everything can have some sort of a goal to it, a measurement to it, and then you can truly decide whether or not it's successful. I thought what was also interesting is the sort of flexibility with your goal. That
Hmm.
sometimes you set a goal and you start aiming toward it and working toward it, and you've got everything implementing the right way, and you realize that your goal was off target, or
Yep.
that maybe it wasn't realistic, or maybe it was too low, or maybe it was something you've already achieved and you didn't even realize it because you hadn't measured it before. So I think that having that flexibility with yourself to be able to adjust your measurements is also
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really valid point because I remember my younger brother, he was always saying, what gets measured gets done. A lot of the times operators are looking at these KPIs and when they actually start measuring it, as you said, they've actually surpassed that number. They've already improved that efficiency. They're hitting that milestone. And I just think more operators have to get into this mentality of setting goals, even if they are audacious or even if they're a little bit more optimistic, just to have somewhere to aim towards. Because a lot of us got into this making it up as we go along. And now we're definitely getting to a point of maturity where we have to actually start thinking about where do we strive our teams? Where do we point our community managers? People are coming into this industry for careers, not just part-time jobs or short-term gigs. They're coming into this and we have to level them up. We have to level ourselves up as managers to enable future generations of co-working leaders to grow through the ranks and take stages and share measurements and data that they're seeing from their companies. And we have to set the stage for that now to enable that next generation, right?
For sure. And I think From the employee standpoint, you want to know whether or not you're successful without
Mhm.
having to have your boss or someone sit you down and say, hey, you're succeeding or hey, you're failing. You want to be able to know, okay, I'm on track. I'm doing the things I should be doing. I'm making progress. I'm getting better. All of those things are important just from a
Yeah.
self fulfillment perspective as well.
Yeah, and it's also the fact that we're getting a lot of folks hop ship from other hospitality industries to co-working, giving up the nights at hotels and restaurants to work in co-working, giving up the ups and downs of events world and conferencing to come to co-working. We forget that in all those industries that are much, much older than co-working, they've had these measurable standards and metrics for decades now. And even the
Mhm.
most junior person in those industries are used to being measured up against some sort of objective or measurable goal. I think it's definitely a wake up call that we need to start thinking about this as an industry and maybe talking about it more at conferences and at unconferences. What are you measuring will help us build a better, and maybe we can give that over to the Flock team to kind of put together as something that they recommend to managers to really think about opening these discussions more widely.
I think it's
Um,
great.
we we are close up to time, so if you are listening and you had a great time listening, do go check out the newsletter. There's some other great resources I put in there. We had two data drops, one out of Canada with Optics saying that the Canadian market is projected to triple to $893 million by 2030. Belgium just released some numbers where they've seen 19% revenue growth across their region. So some very strong numbers coming out of both Canada and Belgium. With regards to some tech changes, we've seen tokenization for the first time being really brought in as a way to own offices through co-working with a pilot project out in the United Arab Emirates. And then we also had the team at Preferred Office Network release their new brand, their new website, really position themselves as the go-to for multi-city placements. So some great news in this week's newsletter. I think we were around 31 or 32 links this week. There is still a space for sale in Chicago if anyone's looking to buy into this industry. Bryce, thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you in person again soon. Maybe back on the podcast again soon.
Sounds good. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I will see you in Chicago at the Preferred Office Network Lounge, perhaps.
Absolutely. I'll see you
There
there.
we go. Awesome. Thanks.